Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first convening of the Equitable AI Community of Practice. We're thrilled to have you joining us today and to be featuring some really wonderful speakers. My name is Julia Neer. I'm an assistant director with the Geotech Center at the Atlantic Council. I have a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. So first of all, this event will be recorded and will be posted on the Atlantic Council website for later viewing, should you like to return to any of the things that were mentioned today. And second of all, you can submit questions for our speakers throughout the session at askac.org. The question link will be posted in the chat for this event. And so please feel free to use that link or just go directly to askac.org. And you can submit questions throughout today's event and we will address them towards the end at the Q&A period. I think that's it from me. So with that, I will pass it off to Sachi to get us started.
Thank you so much, Julia, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Equitable AI Community of Practice. We are so happy to see you here. I just want to give a few quick opening remarks to orient you to why we are here and what has got us to this point. And really, it starts with artificial intelligence, right? This technology that we're all going to talk about. And I think, at least these days, I don't need to convince anyone that it is a very powerful technology. And it's also becoming a very global technology rapidly. So, we're using it across all these sectors in international development, in agriculture, in education, healthcare, you name it, right? There's potentially a use for AI to help make our processes more efficient or get more insights about the ways in which our programs can be more impactful. And so in this way, it's starting to impact, all people all over the world. But I think what we want to stress here is that even as AI is growing and expanding globally, it doesn't reach people equally in the same way, doesn't impact people in the same way. So at USAID, where I work, we really strongly believe that we need to use this technology responsibly. We need to make sure that we are advancing inclusive and responsible AI. And we've outlined this in USAID's AI Action Plan. So I am Sachi Doshi. I work in USAID's strategy and research team. And along with USAID, DAI, and Atlantic Council, I'm very, very happy to welcome you to this community of practice to talk about how we can promote equitable AI. So because we wanted to promote equitable AI, we launched the Equitable AI Challenge in 2021. We don't just want to support AI growth, we want to intentionally address the ways in which AI can produce unequal outcomes for different people around the world. And for this challenge, we're focusing specifically on gender. It's the largest dimension along which we can see AI inequity. For example, we can see that AI can perpetuate existing divides between men and women and majority and minority genders. And that's the piece that we want to address through the Equitable AI Challenge. So far through this challenge, we've awarded 5 grants to consortia of partners who have co-created their approaches together. Each of these consortia are addressing really important challenges that come with making AI equitable. Many of you are in the room today, so we're so happy to welcome you. Thank you for joining us. You can read all about the 5 different grantees on our website, which I really encourage you to do, and you'll be hearing from some of them today and in the coming sessions. So please do tune in and hear about the work that we're doing. But we're doing everything from building safeguards on large-scale AI systems that governments might be using, to auditing AI chatbots in the healthcare space, to producing due diligence processes for risky AI-based tools in digital finance and others. And all of these approaches can collectively help to make these tools more transparent, accountable, and more fair. I'm also so proud of the work that our grantees are doing. But we realize that these 5 grants alone can't do this, right? So that's why we want to build this community of practice. We need to do more. We need to come together. Those of us who have been working in the AI space know that these challenges with AI have been around for many years, even though much of the world is realizing some of this now with the recent leaps in generative AI and ChatGPT coming on the scene. But we can make use of this moment. We can meet this moment where the world is now paying attention to AI and shine a spotlight on the ways in which AI is not often equal and how we can collectively work together to make that happen. That is the motivation for this community of practice. It is to provide a space for us to discuss where we are seeing challenges with AI in our work, how we can address them together, and build collective steps to make AI safer, fairer, and more inclusive. So you can see on the slide here how we've structured this community of practice. We have basically our large community of practice, all of you are welcome to be in them, and it's open to anybody. We will be having 3 different sessions of this community of practice, starting with this one. But we also have a core working group within this community of practice. These are practitioners, those who are building AI tools and systems, those who are working to address AI inequity in tools and systems. And there will be 3 workshops that they will be participating in. The next slide, please. So this core working group will be, like I said, these practitioners who focus on building and addressing AI inequity. And they'll be guided by the principles that you're seeing on the screen right now. The idea is to keep this restricted so that this is a safe space for practitioners to voice the concerns and challenges that they are seeing in their work. And then, next slide, please. They can bring these the things that they are featuring. We can bring them to the larger community of practice where all of us will be. That includes folks like me who belong to donor organizations, to others who are in the research and think tank space, to private sector leaders, so that we can hear what the practitioners are saying and identify where collective action is possible. So this is the schedule of events. The first core working group meeting happened in April, and here we are today in the first community of practice meeting on May 31st. And then we'll be alternating between the core working group and the public community of practice webinars as listed in the schedule. So the next one will be on transparency and accountability, followed by gender inclusive AI governance, representation in AI, and then our final session in September where we'll all gather is where we'll sort of reflect on everything we've learned and what collective action and next steps we can take. With that, I want to close my remarks and pass. I want to just reiterate that this is our community. I really want us to make it as such. We hope that you will share the things you are working on. So please reach out to us if you'd like to feature your work. We will be featuring some of the work of the Equitable AI grantees as well. And with that, just welcome. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. And I will pass it to Lloyd Whitman to share some of his opening remarks from Atlantic Council.
Thank you, Sachi, for that great background on this community we're supporting together and why it's so important to provide a safe space for you all to connect, share, and learn. So I'm Lloyd Whitman. I'm the Senior Director of the Geotech Center at the Atlantic Council, and I'm honored to welcome you all to our first public workshop in the Equitable AI Community of Practice, facilitated in partnership with USAID and BAI. Before we begin, I just want to share a brief overview of our work here at the Atlantic Council. Some of you might be new to the Atlantic Council community. We're a nonpartisan organization that galvanizes U.S. leadership and engagement in the world in partnership with allies and partners to shape solutions to global challenges, a mission we describe as shaping the global future together. Our CEO, Fred Kemp, likes to say, we try to be a do tank, not a think tank. So our goal isn't just to write and speak, but actually to work with the community and have a direct impact on global challenges. At the Geotech Center, our specific focus is to shape that global future together by identifying and communicating what's required so that emerging technologies like AI can enter use widely across the globe for public benefit, while identifying and mitigating potential societal and geopolitical risks. And certainly gender bias in AI is both of those. And we pride ourselves as being a bridge between the technologists and the global policymakers to develop actionable tech policy partnerships and programs to be a do tank for responsible development and use of emerging technologies. Certainly, it's clear that AI here is having a moment. And so this is just really a great time to be having this conversation with this group. So we're pleased to be able to partner with Sachi and the rest of the USAID and BAI team to support this community of practice. It's a very important extension of our other work in AI, including our AI Connect program we run in cooperation with the State Department. So to lead off today's core working group session, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, USAID and DAI's Gender and AI Fellow, Genevieve Smith. She has a master's degree in development practice from UC Berkeley and is currently working on her PhD at the University of Oxford, focused on AI and gender. She's also the associate director of the Center for Equity, Gender, and Leadership at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business. For over a decade, Genevieve has conducted research and worked to advance inclusive technology, women's economic empowerment, equity and inclusion in the workplace, and gender lens investing. She's worked with the International Center for Research on Women, UN Women, and UN Foundation, and has published on gender, justice, and technology, including AI. So let's give a warm welcome to Genevieve to take us into some slides.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. So I'm going to delve us into the topic a little bit and provide just a brief overview around gender equity and AI to kick us off. So the question that we're really asking, if you go to the next slide, is how do we advance AI that's gender smart, AI that advances gender equity rather than embeds and scales gender bias and inequality? So this is kind of the question that really drives us. And when we had the initial core working group session, the one with with practitioners and researchers developing and implementing AI technologies, including grantees and semi-finalists in the Equitable AI Challenge, we talked a lot about what are the challenges to mitigating bias in AI, especially as it relates to gender. And I want to share back with you all some of the things that we talked about. So first off, there's this lack of shared definitions and lack of awareness. A lack of awareness around bias in AI, generally in the ways that it can manifest, but also lack of shared definitions related to what do we mean when we're saying bias in AI? What do we mean when we're saying things like fairness? And a lot of times we can be talking past each other when we're using these different terms. So another challenge is related to data gaps. So over or underrepresentation in AI using machine learning is really problematic because the AI technologies will work better for those that they have greater representation from. And so we know that globally there are big data gaps coming from certain communities, particularly more marginalized communities. But how do we address and fill some of these data gaps in ways that aren't extractive? And then there's challenges around tech determinism. So thinking that technology will kind of solve the problems and perhaps putting too much faith and trust in technology sometimes. Lack of transparency and guardrails. So how are we building more accountability? How are we assessing, auditing tools? How are we making sure different audiences understand the ways that AI technologies are making decisions and how those predictions are happening? Private sector priorities, which can often incentivize things like being first to market, which might come at odds with ethical priorities that entail kind of slowing down, really thinking through some of these different issues that can manifest. Gender is binary. The reinforcement of gender is binary within AI technologies and code, which is clearly kind of problematic. And then data privacy violations. So my kind of initial kickoff with this presentation is really to think about that first challenge, the lack of shared definitions and awareness. So my goal here in these next about 4 or 5 minutes is really just let's align on some different definitions as we kind of move forward together. So moving forward to the next one more slide. So many of the AI systems that we see used today by organizations and institutions in international development and humanitarian sectors use machine learning. So that's where a series of algorithms takes and learns from massive amounts of data to find patterns and make predictions. Of course, AI has incredible potential in making decisions more efficient, more cost-effective, promoting higher productivity and growth. But there's also, and within international development, it can help identify, who within education systems might be at higher risk of dropping out, how to distribute things like vaccines, providing loans to people left out of financial folds using alternative data. There's massive potential in using AI to advance these sustainable development goals. But of course, we need to be very cognizant of the ways that AI can also embed biases and produce discriminatory outcomes at scale and the different risks that these pose. So when we're thinking about why AI systems are biased, and again, defining biased AI as AI systems that result in inaccurate and or discriminatory predictions and outputs for certain subsets of the population. So how does this happen? Well, at a high level, AI systems are human creations. They're classification technologies, they're products of the context in which they're created. And in many cases, they mirror and replicate society. We live in a society with bias and inequality. So is it any surprise then that bias is present in our AI tools? The who that's developing these AI systems really matters. It's their perspectives, their lived experiences, their priorities, their values that become integrated and embedded within these technologies. But the who tends to resemble this picture. Most large-scale AI systems are developed in a handful of tech companies and university labs. Many of these different spaces are in the West. They tend to be white. They tend to be affluent. They tend to be male. They tend to be more technically oriented. And so, again, this is a big lack of diversity when we're thinking about kind of who's leading the charge in developing and researching and implementing these different AI tools. So there are very large gender and racial gaps, whether in research or the different firms. And at a more granular level, going to the next slide, bias can enter within the development of AI systems. So looking at kind of data sets, this is really important to think about the ways bias come into play and how data sets are data is generated and collected, how data sets are developed, or data labeling processes. As a couple of examples here on the slide, we see big racial divides with speech recognition systems in the US context. And this is linked to kind of underrepresentation of certain voices and different kind of racial identities within the data sets that these machine learning technologies are learning from. So they don't perform as well. And then within ChatGPT, it's been seen to have these kind of sexist and racist comments within performance reviews. And it's again linked to the data that it's learning from, which reflects racism and sexism that exists within different jobs and within the communities in which we live. So beyond the different data sets, then we also are thinking about, I like this next visual, which shows where kind of machine learning data sets tend to come from. And we see most of this is, again, from the US. So it's really important to think about it. Those data, or the machine learning tools using these data sets will then reflect the identities and demographics of those populations will perform better for those populations as well. So it's really important to kind of think about where are we getting our data from, who is it representing, who is it leaving out, and what are the implications? And then the algorithm matters as well. So bias can come into play in defining the purpose, the inputs and evaluation of algorithms. As an example here, there's a widely used healthcare algorithm in the US that falsely concluded that Black patients are healthier than equally sick white patients. And it resulted in number of Black patients identified for extra care or being identified for extra care as more than half those as the equally sick white patients. And it used health spending as a proxy for health needs, but Black patients within the US who have the same level of need spend less money because of unequal access to care, among other reasons. And then lastly, the use of an AI system matters too. This is how the context from which it's developed may be used in different, or built might be used in different ways. It can be altered in ways that can be discriminatory, or it can be interpreted in ways that are, depending on our own lived experiences and perspectives that can allow for bias as well. So just as a quick example here, the ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the US, created a kind of rigged an AI system to create a secret no release policy for people suspected of breaking immigration laws. So again, thinking about biased AI systems as those that can result in inaccurate predictions or those that result in discriminatory predictions and outputs here. Just to briefly kind of provide an overview and quickly, those examples are very kind of Western focused, and a lot of it is because a lot of the journalism and research to date has been Western focused. So that's another kind of research gap, is where we're conducting this type of research and evaluations. But what happens if AI making important decisions is biased? So there's an article on the bottom right there that I wrote with a colleague in Stanford Social Innovation Review that kind of categorized different examples of biased AI systems and what are the different types of harms for individuals that manifested, and kind of calculated percentages of those. So you can check that out if you're interested in learning more, but essentially can unfairly allocate resources, result in subpar services, have health hazards, safety detriments, and infringe on civil liberties, and have derogatory treatment, which can have broader societal impacts related to prejudice, economic inefficiencies and losses, and really compromising democratic principles. So these are really, this of course is a massive issue, and massive issue to be kind of recognized and solved for. So it's important for organizations as well. So for those of you who are working in organizations or businesses developing and implementing AI tools, it's not only the right thing, but the smart thing to do in terms of mitigating risk, maintaining strong brand reputation, and just having a better product and value proposition. Also staying ahead of legislation. Legislation is coming. It's moving quickly as we've seen, and just being a competitive leader in this fast-paced industry. So before moving on to our next speaker, I just want to leave with some of the good practices that our core working group discussed in our initial session. So what can we do to kind of tackle some of these biases and really advance AI that is more gender equitable and gender smart? So first was kind of human-centered AI. So thinking about those that we're targeting with these AI systems, how do we center their needs, perspectives, and values and priorities within AI systems? Involving social scientists, not just kind of prioritizing technical and developing and managing these tools. Prioritizing transparency, whether in the data, the model, how it's kind of updated over time, doing different auditing and quality assurance, using different bias mitigation tools that exist, but recognizing there are limitations with those, and they tend to also be quite technical focused versus thinking about broader ways that bias can come into play. We talked about pros and cons of synthetic data sets, making sure there's education for all stakeholders and really raising awareness on this and aligning on definitions. And then recognizing the role of collective governance for donors, for investors, and for government in this as well. And lastly, just prioritizing diversity within teams, within data sets. That's a really important piece that's part of this puzzle. But there's a lot left to learn and uncover and discuss, which is why we're here today. And so I'm excited with that to kind of leave us with this last question to keep in mind as we go through the session, which is, again, how do we advance gender smart AI? AI that advances gender equity rather than embeds and scales gender bias and inequality. And what does this look like to you? What does this look like in your work? With any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me. And I'm excited to introduce Kate. Kate is a co-founder of Women in Digital, or Kate Gramava. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly again. Thank you. Kate is a co-founder of Women in Digital Transformation. Women in Digital Transformation is a women-owned and operated small business and established with the mission to help drive digital transformation in developing countries and support women's full inclusion in the social and economic digital transitions underway worldwide. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here and present the actual project we just completed, preventing and mitigating gender bias in AI-based early alert systems in education. Next slide, please. This project arose in the context of Equitable AI Challenge, and such talk a little bit about the challenge. It helped us to, in collaborative process and co-creation event, to get to know the stakeholders and our consortium members a little bit better, identify the need and our proposal to support the Ministry of Education of Guanajuato, Mexico. Our consortium was formed by international companies, ETAT, PEAT Policy Lab, Women in Digital Transformation, Athena, and with the support of USAID and DI. Next slide, please. We worked in partnership with the Ministry of Education of Guanajuato, Mexico, who were innovating the education policy for the use of data and AI to reform decision-making. Specifically, with the help of the World Bank, they have developed early alert system to identify students at the risk of dropping out of schools at the secondary level. which allows for the personalized intervention action according to the student needs. So the project sought to mainstream the gender perspective in the Ministry AI project. Next slide, please. So with the process at the beginning of the intervention, we identified very specific issues with the AI system implementation at the early alert system project. We identified that there is a lack of communication towards the main affected partners, such as students and parents, regarding the use of AI for decision-making in the educational field. Limited conception of the risk association with the use of AI beyond the potential misuse of the personal data. The design and deployment of the AI-driven public policy without relevant consultations and dialogue with all stakeholders. So basically, some of the issues which Genevieve identified in her presentation. So we also identified that there is a common issues for many governments starting and launching the AI projects in development framework, especially when they think about ethical and regulatory initiatives. And this was also reflected throughout the project on their subnational level in Mexico, the Latin American region, and the Global South. So we try to set our objectives to address this issue, to generate capacity for the responsible ethical use of AI, develop their ethical guide and checklist, and I will talk a little bit more about that. Test the AI fairness toolkit to direct and correct biases in data inputs, and disseminate learnings within the region, and make more South-to-South cooperation. So I really like this map from the previous presentation, that there is such a lack of this network and communication on their Global South. So we try to also address this issue. Next slide, please. So we have several outcomes out of the project. Of course, the result of the application of AI fairness toolkit. So the toolkit was developed by IBM Research and is currently hosted by the Linux Foundation. It is an open source toolkit that can help users examine, report, and mitigate discrimination and biases throughout the whole AI application lifecycle. In this project, the tool was used mainly to look for gender biases in the data. Specifically, the first step was to test whether there is a difference between men and women in dropout reflected in the training data. Having found a bias in favor of men, we applied different methods to mitigate it. Thus, when we compare the results of both data sets with and without bias, we found out that that 4 out of 100 girls may not be identified as students at the risk of dropout. Consequently, these 4 people may be left out of the education policy. The tool has the potential to be used to test other hypotheses of bias and discrimination in the context of AI application for early alert system for school dropouts, for example, indigenous and non-indigenous students between rural and urban population. So these are the application of their AI toolkit. We also have 2 public documents, public goods, hopefully published soon, the AI ethical guide and the checklist. Throughout the research and interviews, we have identified a lack of common understanding, and we also, the previous speakers also talk about that, among the policymakers and technical teams regarding key components that need to be considered then adopting AI systems. For example, what are the relevant regulational safeguards to guide the use of AI technologies in specific countries or specific contexts? How can we ensure ethical and enhance decision-making through the use of AI technologies, and similar questions. So we believe that AI checklist and ethical guide could be useful for any AI project, and that is why this document will be published and available. The AI checklist is designed for policymakers and technical teams preparing to deploy already deploying AI systems for the government use. The checklist serves as a questionnaire, helping to assess and mitigate potential harmful impact associated with the AI deployment. The ethical guide is valuable resources for policymakers at the local level, and though we include a lot of cases from educational sector, we still believe that lessons learned are applicable for any other sector. And the guide includes the glossary and annex, providing additional details and case studies details and their semantic for their AI system. Next slide, please. Some memorable moments of our work with their Guanajuato technical and policymaker teams, and this is also one of the results of their this project, that we encourage this discussion about ethics and equitable AI. We provided the floor for their Ministry of Education team, ask relevant questions. So for instance, how should the ministry communicate the result of early alert system of the school dropouts for different audience? How to avoid this stigma of their identified students? So next slide, please. So we really think that we also did the trainings and knowledge share sessions. So we really think that the other actors in the region can gain some positive and useful information from this project. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kate, for that presentation. We're really excited to have you join us today and to hear about your work. I'll now introduce the next portion of the event, in which we're going to hear from some more practitioners working directly on equitable AI. Each presenter will give us a brief overview of their work, and then I'll turn to the Q&A and ask them any questions that you all have submitted in the chat. So as a reminder, please do submit your questions for them at askac.org. The link is in your Zoom chat as they're presenting. So first, I would like to introduce Mihir Kulkarni from Wadhwani AI. Mihir is an associate machine learning scientist at Wadhwani AI, prior to which he got computer science degrees at Princeton University and IIT Bombay, specializing in machine learning. He leads multiple ML teams at the Institute, including one that built models to predict adverse outcomes for tuberculosis patients across India, which recently won the Best Paper Award at the ML for Health Symposium. He's been an active member of a cross-functional team that has developed a responsible AI framework at Wadhwani AI, focusing on all parts of the AI solution development pathway. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Mihir.
Thank you. I do want to start by acknowledging that it is not ideal for a man to be presenting on gender, but I want to assure you that I have extensively spoken with our excellent female design researcher who's done a lot of work on gender in our organization. And hopefully I can do her work some justice in some of the examples I described. Okay, on the next slide, please. Thank you. I'll start by describing what we do. So the Wadhwani Institute for AI works to create impact at scale by deploying AI solutions for the global south. We work across several critical domains, some of which are healthcare, agriculture, and education. And we try to focus on all parts of the ecosystem. Of course, our core work is to build AI solutions, get them deployed, and make sure they're as good as possible. But we also work on creating platforms for data, ensuring that government data is digitized and essentially usable by software and AI. We also develop centers of excellence, which are essentially our teams work with the government to set up centers where we have people sitting, partnering closely with government agencies to think through and develop sort of these AI solutions. And we also have cross-cutting concerns, such as working on advanced foundation AI models that can be used across solutions, and also what I'm going to describe, which is our ethics and responsible deployment framework. So this was roughly a year in the making. The idea was we wanted to ensure that responsible AI development was done in an org at all stages of the pipeline, right from definition, whether to take up a problem or not, whether it makes sense for us to work on a problem, defining what exactly it looks like, looking at responsible, how you sort of do responsible actions around data collection, and then finally to model creation and evaluation. What we realized is there are so many concerns here that are not sort of easily importable for the West. We sort of had to think through a lot of these responsible AI considerations specifically for our context. One example is that of sort of algorithmic fairness. I think some of the earlier speakers described how AI model performance could be different on different genders, such as men and women. And the way it plays out in the global south is really different. For instance, a lot of women don't even have phones. Women will not appear as data. They'll appear as sort of incomplete data in your records. And thinking through that has been quite sort of a learning experience for all of us. Algorithmic fairness is a very important concern for responsible AI. But today I want to focus on something which I think is more fundamental, which is power dynamics. And so that'll sort of be the example that I'll be talking about. The context in which this example is based is that of sort of grassroots level workers. So we do service delivery of AI solutions through these workers, and they're usually contract employees of the government. A lot of these are women. What we notice is that a government job is often respectable, and families are more willing to sort of allow, if you can use that word, their sort of daughters or their wives or so on, to take up these jobs compared to some other jobs that are in private industry that may be even higher paying, but may not be as respectable. And what we also notice is that because they're lower paying, it sort of is fitting the social expectation of the women to sort of be the secondary earner to the man. And so in these contexts, we have our AI solutions deployed, and we also try and create spaces in which we can get conversations, feedback, and we obviously have meetings with these folks as we're co-creating the solution, sort of making sure that they're centered. What we noticed is that there's often a power dynamic at play in which women can often feel uncomfortable expressing their thoughts openly. And what we've realized is understanding the full context of how these women work and the challenges they face is very important to actually build solutions for them. The key we've realized is to give them agency. One example I want to talk about is we have a tool that it's called the Integrated Disease Surveillance Tool. What the tool does is that it scours the internet for potential news articles that talk about disease outbreaks at local levels. So we can flag these and have people going to those sort of government employees going to those places, ensuring that the disease doesn't have an outbreak before it actually becomes like a big deal. And so for this automated tool, we needed to have some like concrete definitions to ensure that we were able to label the articles correctly. In the meetings where we were discussing, so there was one female employee who was sort of responsible for running this tool before we sort of started building this. She was asked sort of what definitions she uses for certain events. So what does an outbreak event look like? What does maybe a transmission event look like? And we noted that she didn't really have answers. And there was like a lot of sort of, there was no response from her. She wasn't able to sort of come out and like really express why this was an issue. And then I designed researcher sort of through multiple conversations, one-on-one in sort of a context where she didn't feel like sort of suppressed and she didn't feel like she couldn't speak in front of her superiors. We ended up finding out that she was never actually told what these definitions were. However, it was not possible for her to express that in that context. And so what we realized is that this is like a very important way in which these gender actually plays a role, which is that of people not being able to express issues, and therefore the work or the solutions you develop not really being able to hit the right note. The other sort of thing I want to talk about was that of this idea of emotions. We noticed that the way we sort of communicate in our focus group discussions or even sort of in collecting feedback, we noticed that women tend to often lead with emotion, and they're happy doing that when there's not pressure, where there aren't other men around who may make fun of them or who may sort of create like an awkward situation. Oftentimes, this emotional sort of communication is judged, but we realized that it's very important, and it's sort of is the way in which a lot of them feel more comfortable sort of communicating. we noticed like women employees tended to have more sort of emotional investment in some of these causes. So we were talking to one of the doctors who used to sort of work in data entry. And data entry is obviously not a very sort of high profile job. And she would be mocked by other people because, it's not a super prestigious job. But we ended up finding out that she was emotionally invested in this idea of nation building, sort of working in some small way to help sort of public services. Again, the way sort of we had to sort of discover her sort of emotions or her sort of perspective on our solution was to understand sort of how her investment was in that solution, which turned out to be quite different from some of the other male employees who maybe were sort of doing it for their primary income, or were just sort of able to express what they felt more openly. And so I think the message I would like to leave you with is that while sort of technical sort of fairness considerations and sort of more very core AI sort of specific problems are something we want to consider, I think the broader context and these power dynamics are also very important in actually building solutions that are friendly to all genders. Thank you. I hope I haven't overshot time. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mihir, for that presentation. I definitely have a few questions for you, but I will hold off until our Q&A portion at the end. And reminder to our audience to please also submit your questions as well. I'll now introduce our second and final speaker, Mike Minkoff from Athena Infonomics. We're really excited to have you here today. So Michael serves as Athena Infonomics Director of Business Development and Interim Director of Data and Digital Governance. He brings over 13 years of international development consulting experience, working most extensively at the intersection of environmental and climate risk management and political economic decision-making, and increasingly in exploring the risks and opportunities presented by data and digital tools and services in development. Michael received his MA in Law and Diplomacy from the Fletcher School at Tufts University, where he focused on international political economy, international trade and commercial policy, and international environmental policy, and a BA in political philosophy from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So, Mike, we're very excited to have you here today, and I will hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Julia, and thanks to the Atlantic Council and USAID and DAI for hosting this wonderful event. So I'm going a little rogue. I don't have the PowerPoint here, and I'll be mindful of time because I think we're maybe a little long. But so Athena Infonomics has been, is an organization that was founded in Chennai, India, and remains headquartered in India. We have some presence elsewhere now, but and since its inception about 13 years ago, working at the intersection of data and technology has kind of always been at the heart of the work that Athena does. And for us, that kind of comes in two different pathways. One is in this data and digital governance space, and looking at the kind of questions of ethical and inclusive use of data and digital systems and tools and processes, including artificial intelligence and machine learning. The other is more on the digital tools and systems development itself, and that's an area we operate in. I'll touch on that a little bit later. So in the data and digital governance space, there's a number of different ways that we've intersected with these questions of equitable or appropriate or effective use of data. These have ranged from doing a global landscape analysis of global data sharing platforms, looking across things like data collaboratives, or just global data use systems for understanding the constraints and what really inhibits and or makes for effective data sharing and data use at a global level, and or more kind of micro assessments of looking at specific countries and their digital ecosystems and what the opportunities or needs or constraints are to developing and operationalizing in agriculture or other sectors the use of digital tools and systems. The challenges that we run into are not obviously that different than things that Genevieve highlighted as kind of the 7 takeaways from the community of practice, right? Data transparency, data familiarity, data representativeness, and bias, and recently working with Kate and WinDT and ITAD and Pitt Policy Lab, it was a real privilege to kind of get to participate and lead the South-South knowledge exchange between government of Mexico and government of India, kind of taking, some of our contextual approach to trying to understand some of these challenges and integrating with some of the key stakeholders and relationships that we have across India, particularly in the states of Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana, and really hearing from some of the senior leaders operating and working in the respective state governments on digital development and the use and operationalization of AI for governance, for policy, to get the reflections on kind of what was happening in Guanajuato, what WinDT and the others found as far as some of these incidences of bias and these issues related to the dropout rate detection, et cetera, and also share their own kind of approaches and processes. This has ranged from developing their own safe and ethical AI use policies, developing scorecards for kind of evaluating the effectiveness and governance of AI. There's a lot of interest and intent in creating and action in creating incubatory ecosystems for AI in India. Particularly like Telangana has TAIM, the Telangana Artificial Intelligence Mission, and for us at Athena, we continue to have conversations with these stakeholders to explore ways to continue to work with these respective state governments, potentially with USAID and others, to see if there's opportunity to kind of continue to cultivate these ecosystems together in a way that really embeds these principles of equitable deployment of AI. And the other piece, and honestly, Mihir and Wadhwani, definitely spoke more eloquently than I will. I'm not the technologist. Actually, going back to what Genevieve said at the top, I think Athena comes heavy on the social scientist side, complemented by a bit of the data scientist side. And we obviously firmly agree that social scientists need to be embedded in the kind of technology development process. But we are, looking to expand some of the digital tools and solutions that we've developed, particularly in the water and sanitation sector, and look at ways that geospatial layers and administrative and financial data can be integrated and operationalized for use in other sectors. But the inherent question there, the inherent challenge, as Mihir spoke to so effectively, is who is being represented by that data in the financial and administrative data sets that you're looking at, who if you're implementing or embedding machine learning principles into the technologies that you're developing, who really is going to be properly accounted for and underrepresented or overlooked by virtue of the technology or the technology-based kind of decision making that you're trying to enable and affect. So anyway, we're really, we're deeply appreciative for the opportunity to participate in this conversation. We think it's so important and so central and core to kind of how we think about, development solutions, because really artificial intelligence is just one extension of kind of a data-based development revolution, in effect, right? Where this is going to be the way things are done, is driven by data, driven by big data solutions. Artificial intelligence is clearly here to stay, and the landscape is moving quickly and evolving quickly, and so this conversation is so very important. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you to both you and Mihir and to all of our other wonderful speakers today. Now, at long last, we're going to enter the Q&A portion of today's session. And so I'm actually going to circle back to Genevieve's presentation. We do have a question for you. Genevieve, so you mentioned that a lot of what we know is based off of Western media and case studies. So what are some of the ways for us to bridge the gap with respect to understanding AI inequalities in non-Western countries, if a lot of kind of like our baseline material is coming out of the West?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to fund more research and kind of researchers in different parts of the world and kind of, so supporting more research in different places. So kind of donors can have an opportunity to support more research in different places and encouraging that. And then, I think part of it too is like, even though we don't have as much research looking at different places globally, a lot of the same core issues and challenges are really similar. And so we can kind of create some of those different like connections and synergies and understand kind of like the root causes are quite similar. So I guess like, yeah, that would be kind of my initial thought and response, but a really call to action, I guess, for donors and, other folks in this call, or researchers in this call, to do more research in different contexts. And I think a lot of our kind of ethical and responsible AI like perspectives and conversations also tend to be really Western focused. And so just kind of a call to action for folks in this call to recognize that and kind of fill some of those gaps.
Great, thank you. And I noticed a couple of nods from our other speakers. Did anybody else want to hop in on that? No worries if not. Okay, then I will move on to the next question. I have a question here for Kate. So you talked a lot about kind of your work on working with government and working with public institutions to integrate gender equity, but what are some of the challenges that you faced in encouraging the government to integrate gender equity, and how have you addressed those?
Yeah, no, I think the main challenge we faced is that there was initial very limited understanding on the government side and the technical side on the bias and in general the challenges with the equitability of the AI system. So this question wasn't really much discussed within the team and the technical team and the policy making team. But and this was one of our key activity. We conduct the specific trainings both on their gender bias, what it means, how it affects their result of their work and the implementation of the AI system, and talk about the system itself, the fairness toolkit. So we try to engage their government team as early as possible, and really keep them through their entire process. We ask them to comment on the ethical guide and the checklist, knowing that this will be the public goods, but we really want the very specific experience reflected in these documents as well. So I think this was the main challenges. And I think this is what we need to expect moving into the similar projects, that initially the team who needs to implement and who working with their system, they don't really have their scope of work, the usual scope of work doesn't include this thinking and reflection on ethics and bias and frameworks on overcoming this issue. So we really need to have some specific time to work with them on that.
Great, thank you, Kate. And that tees up really nicely to another question I have here, originally for me here, but I'm certain you could respond to it as well. So how can AI practitioners work to kind of use the real world strategies that you mentioned, Mihir, in terms of addressing power dynamics? How can AI companies and practitioners pair those real world strategies with their AI powered solutions?
Oh, I think it's very important to have a very, I think you need to have a commitment to doing what's called co-creation, which is like building it with your users every step of the way. The development sector is interesting because oftentimes your users are not the same as your beneficiaries. And so you also have to take the beneficiaries into account. And from what I've seen, the best way to do that is by hiring really good user research people who just know what the right questions to ask, the right research to do, and they understand what needs actually are. Because the thing that I've sort of felt as a privileged man is it's difficult for people like us to really intuit how sort of these would play out on the ground. So having someone who's gone to the ground, done the research, understands sort of all the dynamics is very important, specifically for like these power dynamic things. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Mihir. And then we are coming up on time, so I'm going to pose one question. Oh, I have one more that just came in. I'll ask. This is a great question, so I'll ask it before I hop into our conclusion. It's a Question for Kate. So using the AI bias toolkit, what fairness and bias metrics did your team decide on and why? Did you incorporate local cultural notions of fairness into your decision making, or could you tell us about your process?
So we have we worked very close with their technical team on the ground, and we have the technical experts on our team to identify the variables and the metrics for the toolkit. So we specifically focus on their gender perspective for this specific test and the data sets. But as I mentioned, that the toolkit itself can definitely work with their more specific local context, as for instance, indigenous and non-indigenous population in the country based on the country specific. And this is important and really depends on their specific project situation. So for our project, we specifically work on their with the gender metrics. So this was the key focus on our intervention.
Got it. Thank you, Kate. And so now I will kind of begin our conclusion of today's event. And so I'd like to hear from each of our speakers. Usually what I like to do towards the end of these events is kind of hear a key takeaway from each of you or something that you'd like to leave the audience with. And so I will just go in order. I'll ask Mike first, then me here, then Kate, and then Genevieve.
I think I probably already said it at the end, but I think this is the, well, first of all, I think Mahir, what you said about the power dynamics and integrating that into the AI technologies is so important, and likewise your answer on the subject matter experts or the experienced user researchers I think is really important. So I guess I'll focus there and just say, embedding these principles into the data and AI tools and systems, I just think is foundational given where the development of this technology is and how it's going to intersect with and beyond international development.
I think for me, I think Genevieve's point about focusing on the right definitions and just getting agreement on what needs to be done is so important. I think getting everyone on the same page is hard, but it's a super necessary. And the other thing I also want to add is that it's really nice to have a forum where people can come and discuss these things and share ideas. So just having a conversation with other practitioners, just seeing what other experts have been doing, I think is something that we should continue.
I think I go next, right? So I think for me, it's the part of the discussion of the lack of research and collaborative networks, which is currently so obvious and persistent, and especially then we talk of the networks in the context of Latin America and the Global South. So this is something that we definitely can and should support through their activities like that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say, this space is moving so quickly and there's a lot of excitement and everything, which is fantastic, but we really need to take a step back and think about whose perspectives, whose values, whose priorities are we embedding in AI tools and what power dynamics, to your point here. And whose are we missing? So just a question to ask ourselves.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been really wonderful to have you all on board. If you are watching this presentation and you are not yet officially a member of the community of practice, I do encourage you to join our LinkedIn group and to more formally register for the program. If you're interested in joining the core working group as well, please feel free to reach out and let us know. We're always looking for more wonderful practitioners to add to our group. And so I think I will leave us all with that. And, we would love to have you all involved. And we thank you for taking the time today to work with us and hear from us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.